Good afternoon. This is Ukraine Media Center in Odessa, and we are starting our work today. Last week we had to limit a bit our activity, but that's why today we are going to have several briefings. And the first one is the presentation of the report, Forced Deportation of Children to the Russian Federation. Today we have with us Vira Yastrebova, director of the NGO Shidna Pravozahisna grupa, Eastern Human Rights Group, and Victoria Domina, researcher of deportation cases Zmina, Change. Good afternoon. I'm glad to welcome the participants of this event. Today, together with my colleague, Ms. Victoria Domina, I'm going to present the report of the NGO. The institution of the strategic studies and research, headed by Lysyanskyi Pavlo, was involved in the preparation, as well as my colleagues from the Shidna Pravozahisna grupa, or Eastern Human Rights Group. This is the report about forced deportation of Ukrainian children from the occupied territories to the Russian Federation. Today, I'm going to speak about the categories of children that are de facto abducted by the Russian Federation from the Ukrainian territory and what happens with them next. First of all, we should start with the fact that the process of deportation of Ukrainian children is well organized. Our enemy was cynically prepared for mass abduction of children from Ukraine before the full-scale aggression, before the 24th of February. The Russian Federation had taken measures through the occupational administration of the so-called LNR-DNR, organizing the deportation of the orphanages to the Russian Federation. There were special orders to establish the legal base for providing shelter to the children, but this is their position. But we believe that this is the cynical crime committed by the Russian Federation, and later on I will explain why. We have recorded facts and cases of the deportation of children, and we believe that even those children who leave Ukrainian territory with their parents are also considered deported, because people are limited in their possibilities to leave occupied territories. So this choice is not a conscious choice for children. The Russian Federation has developed the whole program to make Ukrainian children Russians, to rectify the demographical situation in their country. How it happens? Their children on the occupied territory of Ukraine, not only from orphanages, but also those who are deprived of the parents' care. The administrations of the occupied forces created commissions that allegedly check the conditions of care of children on the occupied territories, and they use these facts to deprive parents of their care. These children are taken from the families and they brought to the specific points of the occupied territories, LDNR. They are accumulated there, and they are brought across the border to the special camps. Then they collect the information from children for their database of orphans that they have in the Russian Federation. Then they issue Russian documents granting Russian citizenship to these orphans from Ukraine. This activity is based on the Putin's order of the 30th of May 2020. By this order, they ensured the opportunity for quickened gaining of the citizenship of the Russian Federation for these children. They say that they have been rescuing these children, but this is not the truth. They just try to increase the Russian population. They turn Ukrainian children into Russians, and they change the documents and they falsify the data in the applications for the adoption of these children. So if Russians want to take children and to adopt children, and they call it the adopting of children from Donbass, they have this opportunity. And we know that even the names of children are changed. And we know the fact that they changed the name of the 6-year-old boy. I would also like to add that in this report, you can also find links to the relevant orders and decrees that were adopted by the Russian Federation, by the so-called executive and bodies. For example, in this report, you can find a decree of the 22nd of October of 2022 by the government of the Russian Federation. This is the 31st page of the report. Here you can find the information about the increased cases of refusal of the parents from the Russian Federation to take care about the children they adopted. And these people are sent back to the orphanages. And this is related to the fact that these children from the Ukrainian territories can be sick, or they have some psychological or mental disorders. And they don't want to take care about such people. So they felt that patriotic surge, and they adopted these children. But then when they find out that these children have different types of problems, including mental problems, they just refuse to take care about these children. And they can say that the heroism is not the best motivation to adopt children from the Donbass region. And this is the quotation from the representative of one of the NGO. And she proves that people refuse to take care about these children. So they used to have around 5,000 refusals per year. Now the number of cases has increased. To prevent such cases, the Russian Federation allocates funds for 82,000 children from the occupied territories of Ukraine, including the occupied territory of the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson Oblast, to conduct in-depth medical examination of children on the occupied territories. The amount of expenditures for this medical testing is more than 353 million rubles, and the period of such medical measures, and this is de facto medical filtration of children, is limited to the period from the 1st of November to the 31st of December this year. This means that the Russian Federation has decided not to deport people, not to deport children with health problems from the occupied territories. They want to select the quality material, so to say, and we see that children is just a material for them. We can say this because of the attitude of the Russian Federation to these children. So they are going to filter these children, and they will tell healthy children to the Russian Federation, issuing the Russian documents to these children. They will also change the information about these children for their relatives not to be able to find them. We have also analyzed and have found evidence proving this information about the places where the children are held at the moment. Russian Federation has been stealing our future from us because our children is our future. They amend their documents, they change their historical mentality. They try to do everything for our children, the children from Ukraine, to forget about who started the aggression, military aggression against Ukraine, to deprive them of historical memory. I was involved in preparation of this report. Our organization has been working since 2014, and we have been monitoring constantly the processes happening on the occupied territories. And we thought that we had seen everything. But this new cynical approach, just astonishing. And we need to explore, to study these processes, but not to prepare the report, but to change what has been happening there and to bring the Russian Federation to liability. We, as the civil society, should understand what has been happening there. So they kill Ukraine, they kill Ukrainian not only through shelling, not only through genocide and the military crimes, but also through our children. 2 days before they started the full-scale aggression, they had already had the documents envisaging whom they would deport from Ukraine. So we understand how the bureaucratic machine works in a totalitarian state. So they had this plan beforehand, and they also made everything possible for people not to be able to cross the borderline to get to the rest of Ukraine, for people to be deported to the Russian Federation from Luhansk, Donetsk Oblast, and also from the temporarily occupied Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblasts. And in this report, you can find numbers from the documents from that side. But I don't want these numbers just to be like statistics, because we can see different destinies of different children and their parents, and we should develop the algorithms of activities that will prevent the further deportation of children, that will make it possible to bring back these children. And I believe that at the level of the central level, we should establish the responsible body that will work with the repatriation of the people that were deported to the Russian Federation, to develop complex approach, to develop effective approach, and to bring the Russian Federation to liability, because it should not just become a history. We cannot allow in the 21st century to use Stalin's repressive traditions. And this is what the Russian Federation has been doing to our children. As a lawyer, as the civil activist, I can have my personal opinion, but I think that it would be also interesting for you to learn about the opinion of my colleague, who is a journalist and who has a vast experience of preparing analytical reports and journalist investigation. And now I would like actually to give floor to my colleague, but also to have the opportunity to ask the questions. And we will also have access to the electronic copy of this report, and you will be able to work with this. I think that this information will be useful for you. And now I would like to give floor to Ms. Victoria Domina. Just a few organizational issues. Now we're going to give floor to Victoria Domina, the researcher of deportation cases, and all the reports and all the photos will be uploaded to our Telegram channel after this press conference. Thank you, dear colleagues. I would like to welcome you and actually fully support every word of my colleague, Ms. Vira Yastrebova. And the deportation is a vast phenomenon that started before the 24th of February. But actually, it started back in 2014, on the 18th of February of this year. From the school, from the occupied Donetsk, more than 200 children were deported, and the occupiers even uploaded the video of this process, and we can see there around 100 children, namely girl of 10, 11, and 12 years old. And we know that they first were deported to the village of Zolota Kosa near Taganrog. They were adopted from there. They prepared documents for them. And even from there, we have the information that some of the families have returned these children after illegally adopting them. But why I've mentioned 2014? Among the numerous interviews of Vladimir Zolkin with the prisoners of war, I saw his conversation with the Russian military, Igor Alexeyevich Chabanko. He was born in 2020, so he is 22 years old. And for more than 2 months, he spent in Mariupol. And in that interview, he told about the damaged city, about the corpses he saw. And he saw as his fellow servicemen killed Ukrainian people. But he was very impassionate when he was telling about this. But let us calculate. At the time of the occupation of the peninsula, Crimean Peninsula, Igor Chabanko was a Ukrainian child. So he studied in Ukrainian school until 8th or 9th grade. So he learned Ukrainian language, he learned Ukrainian history. And I know that there was a separate historian course in Crimean schools. And this is yet another proof of militarization. It also shows what will happen to these deported children in 20 years. So the Russian Federation turns Ukrainian children into monsters, and now we can see already the result. Militarization of children is one of the main aspects of deportation. That's why I would like to invite my colleagues to learn the information collected by the international community Inform Nepal that was published in 2020. The report is called Putin Jugend, and the report provides the detailed description of the structure created by Russian authorities, how how the Russian government uses public authorities, educational institutions, just to cover the illegal activities of the Ministry of Defense. And this is the order of the Military of Defense to militarize Ukrainian children. And I would also like to say that Tina Kandelaki or Galustan, so these are the Russian actors or public figures which are actively involved in creating this army from children. And this Yugon army is headed in the Moscow Oblast by the general of the Russian Federation. His last name is Shamanov, who is the military criminal because he was involved in Chechen campaigns, military campaigns, and he is responsible for genocides of the Chechen people. And these people are involved in bringing up children in the Russian Federation. I would also like to speak about one more issue, indoctrination. In the context of the deportation of children, it has a negative connotation, and it is started with respect to the issues related to Hitlerjugend. So here we speak about telling lies to children, which has not been like physically or mentally developed as adults. And I know several international lawyers that use the universal jurisdiction to prove the genocide of the Ukrainian people. Because Russians, they militarize Ukrainian children through this indoctrination. And when it comes to movement of people from one group of population to another, this is genocide. This is Article 6 of Roman Statute Charter. There are a lot of issues and cases which are investigated by civil activists, journalists, etc., at different levels. Because, for example, we don't know how we should properly communicate with children which have been deported if we manage to establish the contact with this child. This child is usually illegally adopted, living in the Russian family, but it is still pro-Ukrainian. If this is a young adult of around 13, 14 years old, how we should properly communicate with such a child? How to get information from such a child, how to record the information provided by this child, and how to start criminal proceedings. So we should focus more on this issue. We should work on this issue. And I would also like, as my colleague, to call for disseminating of this information to the maximum extent possible, because we should keep this in our focus to be effective. Thank you very much for your attention. And there is a very important aspect here. This is actually ideological preparation of the candidates for adopting children deported from Ukraine. The Russian Federation has decided to create the environment of the potential parents, to filter such families, for these families to support the Kremlin. And these people will bring up children in lies. For these children not to be able to reflect critically. So in the Russian Federation, the potential parents should undergo the course of such ideological education. Then they undergo testing, they are interviewed, and they are included in the list of such families. And if there is the conclusion and the decision of the Commission for these families, for these parents, to be suitable for adopting children from the occupied Ukrainian territories, they are used as such families. But still, there are cases now that such families refuse to take care about these children. And these families are not prepared to bring up children. They just undergo the ideological course. And these parents, they are not checked if they are going to be good parents, but they are just checked if they will be able to explain to these children the Kremlin's ideology. So these people, these parents are not explained that they cannot adopt children and thus throw them away. And I'm actually surprised and shocked by the fact that Russians don't even think that before the 24th of February, most of these children had their lives and had their families and parents. Then, after the 24th of February, the Russian Federation has created the special centers for these children to be deported. And the Russian bureaucratic machine prepared beforehand all the needed orders and decrees. So this is clear that Russia is well prepared to this mass crime. So they have even developed the legal base for this, the legal framework for this. So this is a cynical tool to substitute the Ukrainian population and to erase historical memory among those people who are still there on the occupied territories. And we can see the trends now that Russian Federation sends their constructors, teachers, and doctors to the occupied territories. Why is it so? Because all the locals were forcibly mobilized and were sent to the front line to be killed there. And we regularly present our reports. And I believe that to have the clear understanding of the scale of the horrors that have been happening there, we should speak about different areas of the life on the occupied territories. And there is the club of ideologists of the Russian so-called world. They just say that they just can waste people and they can substitute the population and that they will be able to find the substitution for the people who have left the Russian Federation. But I think that this cannot be possible in our times. We should prevent this. We should talk about this. At the national level, under the umbrella of the Cabinet of Ministers and the relevant ministry, there have been created the headquarters responsible for the issue. But I believe that this is a full-scale, large-scale process, and we should develop the legal tool, and we should involve our international partners to make the repatriation procedure possible for Ukrainians, for Ukrainian children to be able to get back to Ukraine. That's why we should not only record these cases, we should discuss these cases, we should explain to our society and to the international partners what has been happening there. We should also introduce additional sanctions, because as my colleague has mentioned, this is the violation of the international law. We should stop this, and we can stop this only through the pressure at the international level. And if you are interested in this topic, please do not hesitate to address my colleague or myself for us to develop some joint mechanisms, some joint tools to find solutions to this situation in the future. We will provide this report to the law enforcement bodies at the international level, to the diplomatic corps, just to spotlight the crimes of the Russian Federation. And we hope that this crime will be investigated and they will be brought to liability. Thank you. Thank you for the report. Now I can give opportunity for our floor to ask questions. Ivana Gerasimchuk, the Seventh Channel from Odessa. Can you speak about the numbers? Can you say how many children have been deported? Is this an ongoing process, and what is the phase of the deportation right now? The process of this forced deportation is ongoing, and it actually started before the full-scale aggression. We have explored data from the 18th February of 2020. Criminals are best aware about statistics of their crime. And now I can just quote the statistics that we have in our report. As of the 29th of November 2022, 4,866,000 people entered the territory of Russian Federation, including children. And I would like to say that these numbers were taken from the Russian Federation. Here, they speak not only about the deported children, but also about the children who moved or entered the Russian Federation together with their parents. But, as I've already mentioned, they are going to send 82,000 children for the in-depth medical examination. And we understand actually why they need this. The Russian Federation was not interested in the medical condition of the children on the occupied territories before that. But facing mass refusals of the parents to continue taking care about the children they adopted, they decided to check the medical condition of these people. So these 82,000 children are potential victims of this deportation because it's still ongoing. I would also like to add a few words. And of course, this is a usual question, the question about numbers. Unfortunately, our authorities cannot provide clear numbers. And they frankly speak about this. They say that there are no objective numbers. That's why we need to have the special body who will be responsible for the deportation of these children. Secondly, it is very difficult to calculate precise numbers because every case of deportation has its legal peculiarities. Sometimes it might seem that this is deportation, but when you dive into this deeper, you find some legal evidence that prove that this is not the case of deportation. That's why we should consider every case separately. Sometimes we have very difficult cases, for example, killed parents or parents that refused from children, or the cases when the families are found. That's why it is very difficult to prepare the precise statistics. But I believe that public authorities should not announce openly the numbers in which they are not sure into. So it's better to say that they don't know and not to say something that they cannot prove. Thank you. Michael Vasura, Newsweek Journal. First of all, thank you very much for your work. And excuse me for asking my question in Russian language. What should be changed to make the solution to this problem possible? And I'm asking this question in the following context. Yesterday, I published an article about how the Russian Federation used hunger and tortures against Ukrainian POWs. And we know what has been happening. The Ukrainian government is well aware of this, as well as Washington and the International Committee of the Red Cross. But no one can solve the issue. And now we have yet another problem with the abducted children. So the question is the same. What should be changed to make the solution to this situation possible? I think that to solve this situation, the Russian Federation should remove its troops, its forces from the Ukrainian territory, and should be responsible for everything it has done in the international institutions. Of course, the perspective is quite foggy now, but we have quite a positive experience when Nazis were brought to liability for all their crimes. What can we do nowadays? I am, as the civil activist, can say that we should establish the body that should be fully responsible for the situation, as it has been rightly mentioned by my colleague, because now we don't have even the precise numbers. As soon as we have precise numbers, we will be able to prepare statistics. After that, we will be able to identify the personality and whereabouts of the children. And then we'll be able to either bring these children back or to try to solve the issue differently. And war criminals shall be responsible for their crimes. And this is not the question to me, I guess. I would also like to add a few words here. First of all, we should bring attention of the journalists, of the civil activists to the problem, to discuss it not superficially but professionally. For these circles to use the resources that they have now just to attract the general attention to this question. So this can be some media materials, investigations about individual children, or scientific materials, as the report that we have been presenting today. And I hope that our colleagues will study this report in details. We need strong groups of international lawyers that will stimulate activities of our law enforcement bodies, because our police and our security service, which are involved in the investigation of these crimes, do not have enough competence just to be able to solve and to investigate this issue. We also need someone who will lobby the awareness-raising campaign among Ukrainians, for Ukrainians to be also interested in adopting those children who have been returned from there, because there are a lot of orphans which are returned from there. And we have the problem that our state do not know for sure what to do with the children which are returned from there. And I know the case of a woman from the Kiev Oblast who was shot by occupiers. And before February this year, they planned with their husband actually to adopt children. And actually, the husband of these children were killed. But anyway, after the tragedy, she adopted 3 children. And the journalist can just show this as a positive example. We need to involve different stakeholders to demonstrate all the aspects of this problem. Thank you very much for presenting the report. Thank you for your questions. And I would like to remind once more that after the briefing, we will publish the link to the e-copy of the document for everyone to be able to study the document and to learn the information that has been collected by the civil activists. In 20 minutes, we are going to have the next briefing that will be dedicated to energy security of Odessa, outages and other problems that are related to the missile attacks on the Odessa Oblast and Ukraine in general. So stay with us, please.